Hello, and we are back. We left off at Deuteronomy 31. And I was talking about how the Lord called Moses, and I don't have my... They could still hear me on there, but now I'm louder. I was talking about how the Lord called Moses and Joshua in, told them all that was going to happen in the future, gave them a song to teach it to the children, would tell them their past, present, and what will happen in the future, and also pretty much already telling them that they're going to fall away and as witnessed against them, as the Lord says. Now, the question remains, why would he do all of this if he already knows what will happen? And I think it goes all the way back to the beginning of the book. I mean the Bible. When I mean the book, is that the Lord is always looking for the heart. And he knows that man will rebel. But yet the Lord still has given us a choice. Now, you can wonder, well, maybe he should have just forgot this whole thing, and he knew Israel was going to do this. Why didn't he just go pick somebody else who would have carried the covenant correctly?
The man's not able.
Because no other nation would have done a better job. Because the lesson is 1 or 2 generations and we all go backwards. The lesson is the sinfulness of man and the rebellion of mankind. That is really the lesson. And also, though, that the Lord's redemption is a part of the story. That even though we get to see this whole history unfold and all prophesied in Scripture of his choosing them, making a marriage covenant with them, them watching them hurt him and stab him and rebel against him all this time, and yet even after all of it, he couldn't let them go, and he was faithful and loving to them. So the faithfulness of God, the patience of God, the grace of God is all displayed through this long, bloody history. You see that? But you cannot get around the fact is he already knew what they were going to do and told them beforehand. So you're saying, why did he do it? Well, he also promised it to Abraham, didn't he?
Yeah.
And but the lesson that we're supposed to glean from it, I believe, is also the love of God, the patience of God, the grace of God, and the faithfulness of God are all displayed through their history. But yet the foreknowledge, and now foreknowledge is interesting. We've talked a lot about it, but you cannot get around foreknowledge here, can you? So the Lord already knows what's going to happen, doesn't he? He has his permissive will, and yet he has his already determined and perfect will. Okay? So, and what's interesting, of course, we know that the Lord, depending on man's choices, the Lord will bring about his will any way he wants. You know, as John the Baptist said, you know, well, the Lord can raise up, these stones can raise up children from Abraham, right? His point was that the Lord will accomplish his will any way he wants to, even if you make the wrong choice. Or I think of Mordecai and Esther. One of the famous quotes of the book of Esther is, if you don't, maybe the Lord has put you in this position so that you can save Israel, but know this, if you don't, the Lord will still bring up redemption for Israel from another place, and you'll miss out. Because he will. Right? So, choice and foreknowledge is always the question. I remember having that question as a young kid. Right? But the Lord knows the future and yet has given us a choice. And to take that away, and to say that the Lord is outside of it and has let us just make our own decision, which is a lot of what's being taught nowadays, and the Lord doesn't intervene and the Lord is not in control. Well, he already tells them exactly what's going to happen. How does he do that? How does he know it's going to work out the way he said? And how does he know that he's still going to be able to bring them back from all the nations whenever they turn to him? It's like he thinks he can do whatever he wants whenever he says it for some reason. That was sarcasm. Doesn't he seem to think that? Doesn't he seem to think that that's not outside of his control? Can he send armies in against them or for them or against them if he wants to? Yes, he can. I just want you to see this theologically. All right? But yet there is an individual choice for each person. And you're going to see that even through the incredible things that happen and through the exile. What comes out of the exile? Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Ezekiel. They all were tested through the fire, but yet proven to find an incredible remnant in the midst of the punishment for the rebellion. Right? So there was a righteous remnant always there who made individual choices through it. Okay? But yet there was a corporate destiny. There's a personal destiny and a corporate destiny. And I think that's something that we need to see and we need to get. That there's a corporate... That's why a lot of time corporate prophecy and personal prophecy are much different. Okay? And I've dealt with this a lot. Personal prophecy is the affection and love of God and encouragement, consolation, right, and strengthening according to the book of Romans, right, words of Paul, on a personal level. But yet there is corporate prophecy. Now, most of the prophets of Israel were dealing with corporate prophecy. Okay? And seeing the nation as a whole, not the individual choice. Okay? And I think that's a very important thing here, because just because this is their corporate destiny is not replacing personal decisions that are made by individuals. Does everybody get that? Mm-hmm. That's an important lesson. And I think that is God's incredible... Now, you're saying, well, I don't understand how God can know the future and yet give us a choice. Well, I don't understand how he keeps us stuck to this big rock. I don't understand how we circle around the sun and yet the moon circles around. I don't understand. Do you understand how any of that works? So get off of it. We don't understand God, right? But yet two very clear things are his foreknowledge and yet his desire for choice of mankind. Right? What would be the reason that he would do this knowing it would happen? Right? Why would he do it if there was no individual choice? I know exactly. Why? Go through this.
Because what's love if it's forced?
Exactly, but he already knows their choice.
There's going to be a harvest. He knows that too.
But so what I'm telling you is that we're going to see later on with Saul, and we're going to see it with David, there's a corporate destiny. The Lord already knows what's going to happen. The Lord has your life laid out before him, but yet his desire is for you to have an individual choice in it. What is outside of our understanding is how the Lord can still bring about his purposed will in the midst of men making good choices and bad choices. Right? And how he promises us that if we turn to him and love him, that he will take our bad choices and turn them into good for us. How does he do that? But he does somehow. He promises to. If he wasn't in complete control, how could he promise such a thing? Alright? So anyway, I'm just dealing with some of the theological ramifications of this. He's telling them what's going to happen. Having them memorize a song that tells them what's going to happen. And yet is still letting them go ahead with it. But wants them to know up front, I know where this is going already. Okay? Now, it's a microcosm of where mankind has gone, right? You had Adam and Eve. What happened to Adam and Eve and their descendants? Did that go badly? Right? So anyway, I just throwing out some of the thoughts that come up when you face that, and I believe it goes back to the same exact what's the right thing? The same exact theology of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden. Okay? The testing of our hearts. And not the Lord used. Now here's another thing I want to say before we dive into this, because I'm just going to finish this up and we're going to go into Joshua. Is here's another thing that we never think about. The Lord uses Israel very strategically. He uses them to test their hearts to see what they will do in their specific covenant that they were given. Then he uses them to test the nations. And then he uses the nations to test them. But he does. All right? But he also, we're in a time now where he's using Israel to test the nations. And we're told that all of our nations will have a corporate destiny based on our choices towards Israel. Not on a personal level, on a corporate level. All right? So right now we're at a time where the Lord is using Israel to test the nations. And of course, there's other times where he used the nations to test Israel. All right? So you have to see Israel as God's, divine timepiece, his divine hand into the nations. All right? So, anyway, and also as to bear his name, to bear his light. Somebody had to bear the name, right? Where would the world be if Israel had never bore his name? Even through the midst of their sinfulness, did Israel still manage to hold the name of Yahweh and carry it to the nations? They did, didn't they? Aren't we here because of it? Even though we know their Greek names, Peter, James, and John, right? That's their Greek names. But their Hebrew names being Shimon, Jacob, and Yohanan, okay? Did they carry? And of course, Saul, his name was not changed to Paul. Saul was his name. Paul was his Greek version of his name, right? Did they carry the name of Yahweh and his salvation and redemption and his commands and right and wrong and morality to the world? They did, didn't they? Even in the midst of their sinfulness and rejection as a nation, didn't they? I'm just trying to get you to see the big picture. Because the big picture definitely comes up here when he tells them beforehand that what they're already going to do. It's almost like, why are we going through all this when you already know? Right? Anyway, so I just, there's a lot of theological things that come up in God's foreknowledge and yet his allowance for personal choice and desire for every heart to be tested in personal choice. All right? Okay, so anyway, I'm done with that. I hope that made sense to you. But of course, this is amazing too, that the Lord, and you also have to think of the Lord as setting himself up for pain. He knows it hurts, and he's going to allow himself to be hurt. He's going to allow himself to be wounded. Would we do that if you knew someone was going to hurt you? Wouldn't you just cut it off beforehand?
Not if it's your kid.
Depends.
Good point. But you see the love of God there, right?
It's the Father's heart.
He loves us so much that even though he knows we're going to hurt him and reject him and stab him, he's still going to work with us. He's still going to love us. He's not going to let us go. All right? Okay. Well, anyway, all of that comes true here, and is really brought out in this story. Anyway, that's all I have to say about it. I'm not going to go through the whole song, although it's awesome. It recaps again. Through the song, they're being recapped and learning about their history and how they've come out of Egypt. Then it goes to all the things that are happening now. And then, of course, it goes into their future and their rejection and their rebellion and their punishment. And then the regathering. All here in this song. It's amazing. But let's skip it because we got to move on. But let's go to the very end. Deuteronomy 32, verse... let's go to verse 40. Verse 40. Indeed, I will lift up my hand to heaven and say, as I live forever, if I sharpen my flashing sword and my hand takes hold on justice, I will render vengeance on my adversaries, and I will repay those who hate me. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh with the blood of the slain and the captives, from the long-haired leaders of the enemy. Rejoice, O nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants, and will render vengeance on his adversaries, and will atone, very important word, circle it, underline it, and will atone for his land and his people. Why is that so important? Well, I told you it goes through their past, present, goes with their rebellion, their sin, what's going to happen. They're going to punishment, they're going to be scattered, they're going to be, they're going to be destroyed, but then he's going to bring them back. But then at the very end, he will use them, and he will then render judgment and vengeance on all the nations who have persecuted them and hurt them and that have hated him. And he will then atone for his land, and his people. Who are his people? Israel, right? So he will atone for his land and his people at the end, won't he? And I love how it ends with that. Okay. And at the end it goes to the nations and how they will deal with them. Anyway, very interesting. Of course, it all goes through, past, present, and future. But we're going to move on. So let's go. Moses came and spoke this song and taught it to them. And so Joshua would carry it and he would teach it to all the children. And imagine this is a song that they would be taught as children. They would all have it memorized. Okay? And of course, it's prophetic. Chapter 33 is Moses' last blessing. He much like, remember Jacob and each of the 12 sons, Moses now prophesies a blessing over each tribe and lays out their future for them. Now I want you to look, because this one is very important, at Levi, at verse 8, 33 verse 8. And of Levi he said, let thy Thummim and thy Urim belong to the godly man whom thou didst prove at Massa. What is that? The testing, right? With whom thou didst contend the waters of Meribah, who said of his father and mother, I did not consider them. And he did not acknowledge his brothers, nor did he regard his own sons, for they observed thy word and kept thy covenant. They shall teach thine ordinance. What is he bringing up there? Today, who stands for the Lord, right? And how they separated brothers and they did not distinguish family, but carried out the Lord's command. I mean, Moses told them, take a sword and go through, right? Remember that? And that's when they were chosen? Well, anyway, why that's important is because, of course, that also goes with the language that Jesus was quoting and sending us back to when he came to separate for who is for the Lord. Okay? And would divide family. Anyway, let's move on, because I don't have enough time to go through all that. Anyway, he blesses each one. It's all good. They all come true, of course. And of course, Joseph gets a double blessing, right? Because remember, there's two. It doesn't really come up Joseph, but Joseph has two because of Manasseh and Ephraim are both sons of Joseph, right? Okay. Anyway, there's a lot more to it in the individual blessings. I just don't have enough time to go through them because it would take a long time. But anyway, moving on, chapter 34, Moses dies. Now, there's a lot that comes up here. In the death of Moses, I have to get into a story that many people have never heard of. It is actually mentioned in the book of Jude in the New Testament. Okay? That is not in here. Now, anyway, so the Lord says, Moses, you're going to die, brings him up to the mountain so that he can see the whole land, right outside of the Jordan, so he can look over the whole land and see it. But no one can come with him. He has to go alone. And then the Lord says, you're going to see the land and then you're going to die. But no one around. Who buried Moses?
Was he buried?
Joshua.
The Lord. But yet, there's a whole thing that happened in between. Now we're like, well, it's not here. Well, Jude tells us. Let's go to Jude. Flip over to Jude in the New Testament. Jude is an awesome little book. It's like one chapter, and it's tiny. And yet in that chapter, it deals with all these very interesting biblical passages. It's towards the end, right before Revelation. Okay? It's really small. Skip over to... Now he deals with... it's the very thing that we deal with today. Peter mentions it too, about reviling, angelic beings, and how people are always taking on principalities and powers, and they were doing the same thing then, and they got slammed for it. All right? But look at this. Verse 8. And in the same manner, these men also by dreaming defile the flesh and reject authority and revile angelic majesties. He's talking about us slandering and speaking and taking on principalities and even the devil, which he reminds us that, but Michael, the archangel, when he disputed with the devil and argued about the body of Moses, did not dare pronounce against him a railing judgment, but said, the Lord rebuke you. And then he goes, but these men revile things which they do not understand. I have a whole spiel on reviling angelic majesties, but I won't do that now. Okay? Well, he's pointing out that don't you try to take on the devil alone. The Lord deals with him. Right? Did that just say that Michael the archangel, the restrainer, the warrior angel, right, of the Lord, sat there stopping the devil? The devil was trying to take Moses' body, but yet Michael would not bring a slanderous accusation against him, but only would say to the devil, the Lord rebuke you. That's exactly what happened. Who here ever heard of this before? I have found that most Christians, 80%, have never heard this story. But yet it's in the New Testament. All right? It is also vaguely mentioned by Peter in 2 Peter. Okay? It's just not as specific, but it's there as well. All right? And this was also passed down in Israel's history. It was part of the oral Torah. That it was very much a well-known thing. Okay? But yet, here we are given a very clear detail by Jude. So, what is this about? Well, the devil tried to take the body of Moses. Why would he do that? Well, would there be a bigger idol, a bigger shrine that he could prostitute Israel with than the body and the grave of Moses? All the other men of God, even including King David, right, and even Samuel, they knew where they were buried. But not Moses. The Lord did not want Israel to have his body. Why? Because would there be a bigger shrine or idol than going and worshiping at the cave or the idol shrine of Moses?
Because he's the source of the 5 books.
Because of
Jews are foundation.
Because as far as men goes, the Lord knew that Moses was, now the Messiah, okay, was greater. Moses said, a prophet greater than me, right? We know that. The Lord was not just a prophet. But as far as men of God that walked on this earth, Moses was at a different level. Okay? And what Israel would have done, would still be doing to this day, even Christians, if we had a spot to go to the burial place of Moses.
But the curious thing is that, God said that he wouldn't go into the promised land, that he would die.
Yep.
But he had to have been resurrected because the apostles saw him in the promised land.
Well,
during the transfiguration.
Well, exactly. Well, that was his physical body died. Yeah. They saw him in Elijah, but yet we know that, we don't exactly understand that part, but it doesn't mean that he had his
Well, they recognized him, so.
they recognized who he was, but also they could hear them talking and very clearly figured that out.
Yeah.
Peter was sitting listening to them talking, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I'm hearing right now.
That's what I'm
Right?
saying. That would be a resurrected person.
Yes,
Person.
but yet, no human being ever saw the body of Moses. We have no idea. All right? And the Lord did that purposely because Israel would have turned his burial place and his body into a shrine.
It would have turned into an idol.
Yep. And that is the reason. But it's interesting the devil tried. But the other, of course, the biggest teaching of that is, of course, that Michael would not bring a slanderous accusation against the devil because only the Lord can rebuke him. We can only rebuke the devil in the name of Jesus. He is the authority. We don't have any. He does. We can use the authority he's given us. But a slanderous, a lot of times, think about us talking, the Lord is the one who's going to deal with the devil. Our job is the Lord.
Yeah.
But a lot of Christians nowadays, they want to go take on the principality of the city of Los Angeles, and they're going to... See, that is so arrogant. That's exactly what they were talking about now. Here. And what Peter's talking about in 2 Peter. Is no, you're not going to be taking you against the principality of Los Angeles. Okay? It's not going to happen. The Lord will deal with that. Our job is him. Our eyes are on him. Right? We do his work. We have his authority. But that is stepping out of place. He's making the point, Jude is making the point, if Michael the archangel would not do that against the devil, who do you think you are? Right? Your responsibility is to the Lord. The Lord will rebuke the devil. His time will come, right? All right, anyway, it's very interesting. There's a lot more to that we can glean from that story, but anyway, I can't go through this part and not mention it. Okay? But Michael prevailed. Of course he did. And the devil was not allowed to have the body of Moses. So who buried Moses? He did die. It says he died. Well, I would say Michael did. We don't know. I don't know that. But it's the best case. Makes the best sense, I should say. That Michael the archangel buried Moses. Right? Anyway, I just think that's cool. Let's move on.
I don't think you'd have to take him. I mean, the enemy has run of the earth.
So Michael, though, the enemy didn't win. He didn't get the body. So he tried. But it's very interesting this story comes up here. And of course it makes perfect sense why. But of course then in that comes a whole nother thing of teaching, which I spent a little bit of time on. I don't want to spend any more on. We will definitely spend more time. You'll spend more time on that when you get to the New Testament. All right. Moving on, especially when you go through 2 Peter. So let's go to, that's the end. That finishes Deuteronomy. Moses was revered. They mourned for him, and as soon as they did, they were going into the land. Okay? Joshua was filled with the Spirit and the Spirit of wisdom. And when Moses laid his hands on him, and the sons of Israel listened to him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses, and so. And then, of course, verse 10. Since then, no prophet has arisen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. For all the signs and wonders which the Lord had sent him to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and all his servants and all his land, and for all the mighty power and for all the great terror which Moses performed in the sight of all Israel. All right. We have moved on past Moshe. All right. Joshua is now the leader. Yeshua is now taking the place of Moses. Okay. Now that is of course spiritual, and it's also prophetic for the future and the natural. Right? But let's go into the book of Joshua, chapter 1. Now came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord. Now I don't have to get into a lot of history with the book of Joshua because it literally was written at the time, right afterwards, and it was chronicled as they went through. And it followed very much seems like the same people that were involved in scribing with Moses. continued on with Joshua. And of course, they saw it as very important to chronicle what was happening. Right? So the book of Joshua starts Israel's history. Now, does it continue on right after where Deuteronomy left off? Yes. But it's a different phase in Scripture. Because the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, okay, Genesis to Deuteronomy, is called the Law of Moses. Right? The Law. Joshua starts Israel's history. All right, now Israel's history goes from Joshua all the way down to Esther. Ezra. Okay? Goes all the way down to Ezra. And that is Israel's history. So now we're in a new phase. We're done with remember I told you there's the law, Israel's history, prophets, right? And of course we have the words of wisdom. And they're broken up into different pieces. Well, now we've started Israel's history, although it picks up right here. And so let's go right into it. Now it came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' servant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. So, the Lord then just speaks to Joshua. Okay, Moses is dead. It's time to go. And I wonder what they were all thinking, what Joshua was thinking when Moses said, okay, I'm going up on the mountain. You can't come with me. I have to go alone. I'm not coming back. I wonder what Joshua was thinking at that point. But, of course, they listened, and now the Lord says to Joshua. So the Lord told Joshua, Moses is dead. Go forward. All right? Verse 3, every place on which the sole of your foot treads, I have given it to you, just as I spoke to Moses from the wilderness and this, Lebanon, even as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, and the land of the Hittites, as far as the great sea toward the setting of the sun will be your territory. No man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life, just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall give this people possession of the land I swore to your fathers to give them. If there's a phrase that and totally really defines the book of Joshua. Remember, Deuteronomy was do not forget. Well, Joshua, one phrase that comes up over and over and over again through the book is be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. And Joshua was strong and courageous. But that was really the theme of the book. Okay? Most of the book is really just recapping the war of Canaan. Okay? And then look, verse 7. Be strong, only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it for the right or the left, that you may have success wherever you go. The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to as written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and you will have success. And all the leaders of Israel were supposed to, remember, according to Deuteronomy, I believe it's 17 or 18, supposed to meditate day and night. The ruler of their people should be meditating on the law day and night. All right? In verse 9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Verse 10, then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, pass through the midst of the camp. Now, I'm just going to go through the storyline now. So now they're going to pass over. All right? But before they go over, one thing they do, right when they're looking across the Jordan, okay, over on the other side, there's this city called Jericho. All right, now I've been in that region, and I know where the Jordan is, on top of where the Dead Sea is as it flows up. Okay? The other side, which is modern-day Jordan right now, is where they are. Looking over, and you see Jericho is in the distance. Okay, Jericho is very close to the top of the Dead Sea, and to where right out comes the Jordan River. Okay, so that's where Jericho is. They can see it. So Joshua sends out 2 spies to go in and look it out and to see because that's the first place they're going to go to. All right. So they come to Jericho. Jericho probably is the most famous story from the book of Joshua, although there's a lot of great stories, but it's probably the most famous one. So they go up to it, and they're trying to look it out and report back to Joshua what it's like and what's going on there. And it's already sealed off and completely shut because they've been watching what has happened. They're all afraid. They've all heard the reports of them coming out of Egypt, and everything is completely shut down, no one in or no one out. So the spies get in, but they're spotted. They're figured out that they're there. So they're looking to try to escape. And Rahab, very important person. Now, interesting about Rahab is that she shows up. She is a prostitute. Now, of course, the Lord has mercy on her because she has not been taught any of this. She hasn't been given the law or any morality. It's all she knows. Right? So it's not the same. But yet, now she has a chance at redemption because of her choices. Very interesting. And the other thing about Rahab is that she is not just a tiny little character here because she shows up a bunch of times in the Bible. She shows up 2 separate times in the New Testament and being praised by New Testament writers as a hero. Okay? She finds her way into the lineage of David, meaning the lineage of Messiah, as his great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. All right? Very interesting. So it's an incredible redemption story. 2 Gentile women who were brought in and grafted into the line of Israel. Great redemption stories. Rahab, and then we're going to get to it after this, is Ruth. Okay? And of course, what are they about? Individual choice. Choosing the Lord. But Rahab then sees the spies and has a choice to make. But she believes. She says, and she hides them and lets them come into her house and says, I know and have heard all that your God has done for you as he brought you out of Egypt, and that your God has given you all of this land. It is yours and no one can stand before you. So she is figuring, why not? She believes and she would rather take care of them. So she hides them. And she says, if I get you out of here alive, will you spare me when you come? And of course they accept her deal. All right? So she hides the 2 of them, tells them where to hide for 3 days so that they can live, and they're looking all over for them. She protects them. The king of Jericho comes and she sends them away and says she hasn't seen them. She protected them, and she just made a deal with them. If you live, and when you come here, spare me. So they actually then give her all of anyone she can fit in her house. They give her more than what she asked for. All that is hers. So any of her family members, whoever she has in the house, will live. And they tells them she writes this whole scarlet thing, a bow, and ties it. And if they see that, whoever's ever in there will be spared because of the kindness she has shown. But anybody who's not in there, their blood is on their own head. Of course, you see blood guiltiness, blood on our head or blood on their head, right? And they agree, and they go back to Joshua, and Joshua thinks it was a good idea. Joshua didn't get upset at them for this at all. All right? And of course, Joshua has them keep his word. So they go back, they make it, and then at that point, the promise to Rahab happens, and then that brings us to chapter 3. Chapter 3 is incredible. Israel crosses the Jordan. This is such a cool story. It's just imagine this picture of being up on the wall of Jericho. And you are looking out and watching this nation. Then you see these priests come with this thing. Remember, you can't touch the ark. It's on these huge poles on your shoulder. It's in the middle. And they start to walk in the water. And immediately when they step into the water starts to go. And they start to walk. And all the water comes up like this. And they're walking slowly with this ark right into the middle, and the whole thing comes dry. And then Israel passes through while they're standing there, and they're holding it. And then all Israel comes through, and then they turn, and Joshua turns to the priests. And then the priests slowly walk the ark out. And as soon as they step on the dry ground, the water goes whoosh. Just imagine watching that. The fear. All right? It's an incredible thing. And of course, then Joshua has them set up the Jordan stones. It's the famous word people use, there's a lot of teachings on it, and it's a good lesson from this story, which is something to remember, God's miracle. Something to remember what God has done. It's a great thing. It's a great concept, right? So they set up these stones that are just a reminder of what the Lord has done, and for each of the tribes, and they, as a witness and a memory of what the Lord has done. It's awesome. Okay. Now, of course, I've skipped this one part, but I'll just go chapter 3, verse 5. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Consecrate yourself is they wash. They go through ceremonial washing and cleansing, all right? And then they prepare for the next day, okay? And then they go through the Jordan, like I just said. It's awesome. They get to the other land. I'm trying to move quickly here. Of course, there's a lot more to say, but I'm trying to go quick. But I love how they're carrying the ark through and the water stops. It's so cool. Okay. And then they come through and they set up the Jordan stones. All right, let's move on. Chapter 4. That starts with the Jordan stones. He tells them what to do. They set them up. It's for the 12 tribes. And then they prepare. Now they're there for a little bit. And what's very interesting is the day that they cross the Jordan, the manna stops coming. Yeah. The manna stops coming the day they cross the Jordan. Now they have to eat off the land. Very interesting. It's like they don't get a little grace period of now they're there, but no. They cross, no more manna. All right? And that's why a couple of times they're allowed to keep some of the animals, because sometimes they need food. All right? And then it's very interesting in chapter 5 that the Lord tells them, he says to Joshua, circumcise the sons of Israel. And you're like, what? There's uncircumcised ones? What's going on here? Well, then you find out this little fact that the older generation is all gone, who came out, were circumcised. But the generation born in the wandering was not. Now, I don't know if it's because of their setup that they had, if it's because it might have been difficult with their wanderings. I'm not exactly sure how that was. But anyway, they have to reiterate the covenant again. They are now in the land, and every male must be circumcised. A lot of them are being circumcised as men, which, a baby doesn't remember it. Right?
Yeah, there was that one town.
So, anyway, they have to be circumcised. The Lord protects them while they heal, and I'm sure there was a long, couple of days of a lot of pain, right? But they heal, the covenant is reestablished. It is a sign of the covenant that they're supposed to carry. But it's interesting that the Lord allowed that to go, and obviously the Lord gave them grace there because there must have been the conditions, or I don't know, in the desert. Something else interesting there. But of course, they have to be circumcised now before they can go. So they do that. The Lord gives them time to heal. And once they're healed, it's time to go. Okay? Now this is a very interesting story before they go in. Let's go to verse 5. And go to 5 verse 13. All right? Now it came about when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, no, rather I indeed come now as captain of the host of the Lord. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and bowed down and said to him, what has my Lord to say to his servant? And the captain of the Lord's host says to Joshua, remove your sandals from your feet. The place where you are standing is holy. And Joshua did so. And then that's it. And it goes into finishing the story. Now, what's interesting about this, what is this about? Why is that in there? I believe that was the Lord personally encouraging Joshua. That's what it was. This was the Lord encouraging him. He's about to take these people in to this incredible, and the Lord gave a time and let him see that. Now, were the angels there before? Of course they were. But the Lord will let him see this guy now. Why? To encourage him. So Joshua knows it's not really them fighting. The Lord is fighting for them. They just have to be obedient. But the angels of the Lord are fighting with them. And you know, when angels fight with you, you win. All right? But I think this is really just about the Lord giving Joshua a real sign and encouraging him and strengthening him. And of course, I imagine he was very comforted and very strengthened by this. One thing you can never accuse Joshua of is being soft. All right? Chapter 6. Even, you know how Moses had a staff? When Joshua was old, he has a javelin. That's what he's using, a javelin. It's interesting, it's a weapon. But Joshua has been their captain of their army for his whole life. Chapter 6. Now Jericho was tightly shut because of the sons of Israel. No one went out and no one came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand, with its king and its valiant warriors, and you shall march around the city, all the men of war circling the city once you shall do for 6 days. Also 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall shall blow the trumpets. And it shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people will go up, every man straight ahead. So Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram horns before the ark of the Lord. And the ram horn, of course, is where we get the shofar. Remember, there's the silver trumpets that were for specific things, right? For announcing the holy. Remember the silver trumpets? But the ram's horn, or the shofar, was for how they would command the army. Right? And they probably had a very different, very distinct sound. And they would get used to it. Great way to alert a large group of people, right? So I ask you a question. They have to go through a 7-day process. 6 days they have to march silently, completely silent around the place. Imagine, though, again, being up on the wall of Jericho. And one day they just get up and slowly march around. Don't make a sound. Go back. The next day they go with the ark and the priests, and they just slowly march around the city. The next day, quiet now. The next day they get up, just quietly march around the city. The next day, quiet. 6 days. 7th day they got to march around 7 times. 7 sevens. Right? And then, of course, they blow the shofar and they all shout. Now, why would the Lord have them do this? Let's get very deep. Why on earth? Now, sometimes the Lord just has them attack, but then sometimes He gives them a very specific thing to do. Why?
Always obedience.
Obedience is always what it's about. Simply to obey. Right? Well, that's a test. Their first battle, they have to do something very specific because He wants to see their obedience level. Well, of course, they do it. And then Joshua explains this whole thing to them. This is what we're going to do. 6 days. 7th day, we're going to march 7 times. No one makes a sound. Then you hear, after the 7th time, the shofars will blast, and all the congregation screams. And all the men scream. The women are not with them. This is the army. Okay? And the walls crumble down. Okay. Could the Lord just have had the walls crumble right away? Yeah, it was about obedience. Right? And they go in, and of course they keep their word. They look for Joshua immediately, right away, to make sure that they keep their vow. Very important, right? Go find Rahab's house and make sure that they're safe. They go and find them. And of course, they fulfill their promise to Rahab, and her and all of her family that is with her is allowed to live. And they don't remember the Lord's commands. They don't just let them live. They take them in and they become them. They become part of Israel. They become part of the covenant, part of the blessing. So Rahab gets taken in. She has no husband. Somebody marries her who happens to be from the tribe of Judah, and the rest is history. Right? And she got a fresh start, an incredible story of redemption and a brand new start from sin and death to life and blessing. Right? Because of her choices. Very great story there. And you know, the truth is, well, we wonder, why does she get praised so much for that? I mean, she got to live all these times to the rant. Well, because that was an incredible thing that she did.
Is there an account of who she married?
I don't think so. There could be. There could be. I'm not going to commit
I'm
to.
curious how that actually happened.
I'm not going to commit to the fact that there isn't. I don't specifically know it, which I'm surprised, because if it was in here, it was a clear one, I would know it. But I don't know. I'm gonna look that up and make sure before I give you a definitive answer. I do not specifically know it. I don't remember seeing it anywhere. I've been through this a lot of times. I'm not going to say it's not. Because there is a lot of, then later on, there's some genealogies and stuff. So, all right? And it does mention Rahab being taken in and apart. We do know her and her family become a part of Israel, and she is married by somebody from the tribe of Judah. That we know. Okay, who happens to have a great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson named David. All right? But it's very interesting. But she is an awesome redemption story because she made a choice to live and a choice for life and to believe, right? And to humble herself. It's awesome. Okay, so that is Jericho. Now, what happens in Jericho? The first battle goes so well. Everything is great. You're excited. Israel's being obedient. Everything is going good. Now, if you're wondering again, I've already laid the groundwork, and you know now why I did it so hardcore about preparing you for everything that has breath. Because if I didn't prepare you, and this was your first time, and you didn't really have a good background, and you went to Joshua, and you saw the Lord commanding everything that has breath, your head would explode. Okay? That's why I was preparing you. There is a reason. There is also a bloodline issue. Okay? Oh, I just smacked the microphone off my head. That was good. Anyway, and of course you're going to see, remember at the end of Joshua, I think it's like Joshua chapter 10 when they're talking about, it mentions that that they had pushed the Anakites all the way out and there was no Anakites left in the land except for Gaza, Gath, Ashkelon. Guess what Gaza, Gath, and Ashkelon are? The West Bank. That is, there's a future people that plague Israel for many, many years. The Philistines. That is where the Philistines are one of the last holdouts. And they survive and they don't go all the way and crush them. And of course then they end up meeting some of the Anakites left from the Philistines. Right? The descendants of the giants. But you see that they go after them. And then we're going to see a little story later on with Caleb when he goes after them. And they have a bloodline thing to deal with as well. All right? But you see why I had to make that case very clear and set it up beforehand. Now, this is a blood cleansing. It's every man, woman, child, and animal. There's a couple of times where they're allowed to keep, later on, a couple of cattle and things alive so they can live. All right? But this is a total blood cleansing. The land has become polluted, right? And without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. All right? The land has been poisoned. Remember all that? I've already explained that. But you see why I did that now, right? Okay. So what happens in Jericho, though, remember before that, even Joshua warned them again right before they go into Jericho about the devoted things. What are the devoted things? The devoted things are all the precious metals and gold and silver and precious gems and all of those things. Those are the devoted things, and they're all supposed to go into the Lord's treasury for them to use. Okay? And they were warned about it. They are not allowed to take any of those things for themselves. They are not allowed to take any of that plunder at all. And of course, why would the Lord do that? To test their hearts. You're going here and there's all these incredible things, but the thing is, another thing about it is most of it is idols and shrines and all kinds of stuff that are made of all these precious materials. It's another reason why they're not allowed to touch any of them. If any of those things, they have to smash them and get rid of them. And of course, you'd be tempted to take the gold. Right? Well, they were warned. They're not allowed to do the devoted things. They're not allowed to take any of those things. They have to destroy it all. And whatever's good, go to the treasury of the Lord. But then they're warned right before they go in again. But now what happens is they're looking over at Ai, which is the next town. And it's very small. It's a tiny little city. They're thinking there's no reason for the whole army to go over there. Just send over, a small amount of men. There's not even a ton there. There's no point in bringing the entire army there. So they go over, a small amount of men go over, and they actually start to get beat, and 30 men die. Now look, this is hand-to-hand combat, and 30 men die, and they freak out. See, if you have look at any numbers from hand-to-hand swords and clubs and spears, you know that 30 men dying is not a lot. Right? But for them, they're like, oh, they just took on all Jericho and didn't lose anybody. Right? So, they freak out and they can't believe it. They have to get pushed back. The men of Ai come out and start beating them. And of course, they freak. Of course, you would too. When Joshua tears his robes and goes before the ark and totally, just can't believe it, cries out to God, what has happened? And this part is very interesting. All right, I usually have this marked. But I guess I don't. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. So I want to actually read it, okay, what he says. That's not the right place. Okay. Well, I'll just quote it then. So what happens is, then they're going in, and they sin, and they go before the Lord, and Joshua cries out, and can't believe what has happened, and he cries out to the Lord, and he's on his face, and he's really saying, Lord, you promised us this, and you let us, what is going on? He starts to really, he starts to kind of grumble a little bit here. He's really distraught. But the Lord's answer is always so interesting to me. The Lord says this, get up off your face, to Joshua. It's written strong. Joshua put it in here the way it was said. Get up off your face. Israel has sinned. Almost to Joshua like, Joshua, you should have understood that. You shouldn't have questioned my integrity here. Israel sinned. They took the devoted things. That's why. They failed the test. Right? So, but I love how he says to Joshua, get up off your face. And Joshua doesn't hide it and puts it in here. He was rebuked by the Lord. He should have known that the Lord wouldn't have allowed this happen if not for a reason. Right? So then Joshua gets up here, realizes what the Lord is saying, repents, I'm sure. And he then says, okay, and then they're going to cast lots. And I always wonder how this casting lots things, but they always do it through. And really what casting lots is they individually seek the Lord on each choice and the Lord chooses. That's really what it is. I don't exactly know how they do that. They do have the Urim and the Thummim, which means the high priest can contact the Lord and always get an answer. Right? So anyway, they let the Lord decide, and the Lord goes to each of the tribes. The tribes are chosen all the way down, right to, as my dad always says, and then we have Achan, who ends up Achan. Right? Achan was Achan. There's a little joke that always works there. But you always can remember Achan was Achan in Achor. Okay, it was the Valley of Achor. Anyway, so Achan was chosen, and Joshua says to Achan, tell me what you've done. Do not hide it. The Lord just picked you out. We know you did it. Right? And of course, Achan tells him. Now, if you're wondering, what Achan has done, 30 men just lost their lives because of what Achan did. Do you know that? He's the reason. 36 men. And anyway, so verse 25 that ends with Joshua saying, verse 24, then Joshua and Israel with him took Achan, the son of Zerah, a sin and mantle, a bar of gold, and his sons and his daughters. Now I wonder, everything he had. All right, every single thing that he had. Now, I don't exactly know what that is. That is the Lord's sovereign choice. Joshua's decision was to try to purge this from Israel because all of Israel now was under this stain of rebellion. Okay? Verse 25, and Joshua said, why have you troubled us? The Lord will trouble you this day. And all Israel stoned them with stones, and they burned them with fire after they had stoned them with stones. And they raised over him a great heap of stones that stands to this day. And the Lord turned in the fierceness of his anger. Therefore, the name of that place has been called the Valley of Achor to this day. So what did Achan do? Achan took of the devoted things. He took of one of the idols or shrines or something that was made of precious metals and took it and hid it. Of course, he failed the test, right? Yeah. And in that, 36 men were killed. And God had to turn away from Israel. And they were cut down because of his choice. After they were warned and warned and warned.
The sins of the father fell on the kids there.
I always think about that too, and I don't have an exact answer. So that's why I said it the way I said it. Because I don't really... it was Joshua's choice to try to purge it. But we also don't know if his wife or someone might have been in cahoots with them. We're not told that, so we can't just assume they were not. Right? So, anyway, they very well could have known what was going on, or either way, it was Joshua's choice, and the Lord was not upset by it, so we have to live with it. Right? We weren't there, we don't know all the details. I guess that's the best way to say it. But anyway, it was a very serious thing. Joshua was trying to right this very wicked wrong because he had the entire stake of the nation in his hand to correct this. And the Lord told Joshua to deal with it, didn't he? Mm-hmm. He told Joshua to deal with this. He didn't tell him exactly how to, did he? So Joshua had to make a decision and deal with this and turn the favor of the Lord. He did. The Lord turned away. I don't exactly have the perfect way to explain that. Sometimes, I told you when I know the answer or I have a good opinion, I'll give it to you, but sometimes you're going to get an I don't know. So this is one of those times.
It would have left a lasting memory with the group.
Yes. Well, I do think, though, there has to be time. I mean, this is such a severe thing. The entire nation could be wiped out if they continue to fail in this. Right? They have to see how serious this is. That it will bring suffering on the entire nation if one of them breaks this. Okay? So, anyway, they deal with it. The Lord turns. And then he says to Joshua, okay, Joshua, you did it. I'm with you. Go to Ai. And of course, now they go to Ai, but the Lord tells them exactly how to defeat Ai. Gives them a plan. They do the plan. No, everybody lives. And Ai is destroyed. All right, they send this whole thing, and they trick them, and they draw them in out of the city, and they come in behind it. And Ai is taken out. And that brings us to the Gibeonites, the trickery of the Gibeonites. Now Gibeah has... Now, do you remember when I told you that the Lord said to them, through Moses, do not make any deals with the people of the land, right? Remember that? Mm-hmm. And that's why they investigated and they didn't believe him and they checked it out, but they didn't, of course, then it's written in there, but they didn't seek the Lord. Because if they would have sought the Lord, he would have told them they're Canaanites. But the Gibeonites have a choice here. Die, or try to make a deal and try to live, right? So they come up with this idea They know, obviously too, the Gibeonites have heard that they're kind to everyone else, but they have been given specifically a mission for the land of Canaan and the inhabitants of Canaan. They must have known that, right? So they come up with this idea. They're going to pretend to be foreigners from a distant land, and they're going to have all old clothes, and they have old rotten food, and they make it look incredibly authentic. All right, and they come up to them knowing, they play on their goodwill. That's what they do, right? And they come up to them, and of course they say the right words. We've heard the awesome things your God has done, and of course to them, they're supposed to take in the alien, right? Mm-hmm. So they check it out though. They don't believe him right off the bat, and they look, but then the moldy bread and say, well, this was warm when we left, and now, such a scam. But the whole thing is, yes, they're supposed to help foreigners, supposed to take the alien and all that. But the thing that they did was the lesson was they did not seek the Lord. They obviously had a very good ruse going, right? Mm-hmm. And they fell for it. But what's interesting is that once they gave them their word, they would not go back on it. Once Joshua said, okay, that was it. They could not, they would live. All right, and of course then they made this deal with them, and they become forced laborers, but it was much better for them to become forced laborers. And you see them come back up when we get to David, Saul and David. The Gibeonites are still Israel's servants, and Saul starts to slaughter some of them, and he pays a big price for it. Because the Lord protects the Gibeonites because of this oath that Joshua gave. All right? Anyway, that comes up later, and then we're going to, chapter 10, all 5 kings come against Gibeon because of this, and we'll get to that. And of course, one of the coolest stories in the Bible, where Joshua says, without the Lord speaking to him, he says, son, stop. And it says, there's no day like it where God listened to a man. It's one of the coolest things. Joshua realized that they're in the middle of the war, and all the guys are here, all the kings are here, but the sun's going down, and he just tells the sun to stop. Now, that just shows you that Joshua got to the point where he understood the authority he was given. Right? It's an awesome, awesome thing. Anyway, we'll stop there. I got to where I said we were going to get to. Come on, right? Let it be written in the annals.
Well done.
Finish Joshua, which is not really that long, and it's a great read, honestly. And then read I had you go to 10. So then I want you to dive into Judges. Let me get this exactly here. I want you then to read to the first 10 chapters of Judges. Okay? Now, this is good reading, let me tell you. You went through some difficult reading. Leviticus might have been a little, but this is good reading. The story will suck you right in. The storylines, and you're going to deal with some of the famous of the judges, and we will stop here, and we will pick it up there next week. Have a good night.